Uh, hey, what's everybody? This is Mike and Fook, and this is the Real Artist Podcast. We are on the Zoom right now with Daniel Mills from Japan. How you doing, Dan?
Hi, I'm doing great. How about you guys?
Good, good. Um, we were just talking, but we never like cleared this up. You go by Daniel or Dan?
I'm really okay with anything. I guess I usually introduce myself as Daniel. Um,
Okay.
yeah, but anything's
So,
okay.
okay, Funk Master Flex it is.
Yeah.
No, so Daniel, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? We know that you're in Japan. Can you tell us a little
Uh-huh.
bit about how you got there?
Yeah, so I came to Japan 13 years ago. And originally I was in a master's program in California, and I was just going to come out for a year. I wanted to teach English, see how I liked it. And then in that year, I met my wife. So that was number
Wow.
one. But then number two, when I looked at going back to the US, I was now categorized as an out of state student. So it didn't really
Ooh.
make sense to go back.
Mm.
So I ended up, finishing my school. Actually, there's, a lot of distance programs now in the US. So I did a master's, I did my doctorate, and I'm now a professor at a university here in Japan.
Okay. And you said you're tenured, so you must have been there for a while. How long have you been at the university?
So 13 years total in Japan. I started teaching kids when I first came here, and just sort of slowly worked my way up. So I've been at my university for, let's see, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 years.
Okay.
Um,
Wow.
and I was really lucky. Like most people, they spend a long time teaching at a few different universities and then getting a full-time job and then finding a tenured job somewhere else. But I've been at the same university the whole time. So really lucky.
Nice. Pretty stable living condition, I guess. Living in
Yeah.
the same area, working in the same area. Cool. Fook, you want to start with first question?
Yeah, so um, it's related to the question that we just asked you. So that we understand that you moved to Japan and you started your career there in at the university as a professor. What bring you to Japan, or how did you end up there?
Well, there was a
I
couple
guess
of
yeah.
things.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Well, yeah. So I've always had a real interest in Japan. I started doing martial arts when I was really young, like 5 years old,
Karate.
and yeah, all different types, to be honest. And
Oh
then,
wow.
so then when I was in university, I didn't graduate university until I was 27. I know I talked to Michael a little bit about this, but I initially joined the Marine Corps and I got an injury. So I didn't do anything in the Marine Corps besides boot camp, but I was in boot camp for an entire year. Uh,
Entire
yeah, it was crazy, but I ended up with a honorable medical discharge. And by the time I got everything going, I didn't graduate from university until I was 28. And during that time, I was teaching martial arts. So I
Okay.
always had this dream of going to Japan and
Hmm.
training in martial arts. So I think that's the
Okay.
first thing that really brought me here.
Hmm. If you're into martial art, you should be in Okinawa, right? That's where karate was born.
Yeah, exactly. I went there for my honeymoon, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I did.
That's
I didn't know
interesting.
that. I didn't know that Okinawa was the home of karate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. I
If you,
did Taekwondo when I was a kid, so
Oh yeah.
that's a Korean martial art
Uh-huh.
for all the listeners. I'm sure you guys know, but
okay.
um, yeah, unrelated. The first country I visited outside of the U.S. was Korea. Just
Hmm.
happened to go there for work, and I like never made the connection between I've been doing Taekwondo for 7 years, and then I didn't realize it was Korean. I just thought it was martial arts. And
Uh-huh.
then when I recognize, you're looking at the signs and stuff in the city, it's like, oh wait, I've seen where have I seen this before? Oh, it's a Korean martial art.
Yeah. Yeah. Korea's great too.
Mhm. Oh, really? I did Taekwondo too, but I was like a
Oh,
black, not black belt. I was a white belt, so a beginner
uh-huh.
belt. Yeah, it was fun.
You
Just all
started. That's
kicking and
good.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Uh, did you start investing right away, Daniel, when you got to Japan?
So I think the interesting thing is all throughout my 20s, I didn't do any investing. I didn't really save money. I wasn't really into any of this stuff. And right before I came to Japan, I realized I'm 28 years old. I have to figure it out. And I bought one of those idiots guides, I think, or the dummies guide to getting rich. And it was actually one of the best books I ever read. And I still have it. Where it just took you through, starting with like index fund investing and moving into real estate and starting a business. And I really used that as kind of my blueprint to do what I did. Yeah. So that was the first thing. So the first thing I did is I started investing. I got a savings, got some savings up. I came to Japan with like $3,000 because I sold a car. That's all I had. And I just saved like crazy and invested in it. It was a good time because it was right in like 2008. So everything was crashing. So I was able to buy into like index funds, which is what I started with right from the beginning at a low price. And that's grown over time. And then after that, I started to get into real estate.
Japanese real estate?
No, so I do own my own apartment where I live in Japan, but all of my properties are in the States. So just to give you kind of an idea of my portfolio right now, I have 10 single family homes, which in the United States, in 3 different states, which are directly owned by me. Then I have one portfolio of about 19 duplexes and a 12-plex, which is in Alabama, which I bought with some partners. And then I just recently started to get into some syndicated deals as a passive investor. So I probably have about 150 units as a passive investor, a small portion of those units. But I started actually with the single family houses. I think that's kind of maybe an interesting story, but I really didn't know how to get started in real estate living in Japan. And a friend of mine, I kept putting it out there, I think on Facebook, I was saying to people, I want to invest in real estate. And a friend of mine who is a lawyer in Los Angeles, who I went to high school with, he said, hey, me and all the lawyers in my firm, we all invest in Boise, Idaho. And we have a property manager, we have a real estate agent. Do you want to come in with us? And I thought this was great because I was like, this guy, whoever the property manager is, he's not going to piss off a bunch of LA lawyers. So it might be a good idea to invest with him, but I knew nothing. I actually just went in and I said to the real estate agent and this property manager are one and the same. And I was like, okay, just find me an investment property. And I didn't even know how to run the numbers. And I just bought whatever he told me to buy, but it was great advice. So my first property was a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, because he said in Idaho, there's a little bit bigger families. So this would get the highest rent, but it had a bonus room. So I bought, it had a bonus room. We turned the bonus room into a 5th bedroom, which increased the rent. And I did that twice, like soon after each other. I found 2 properties just like that. And that was the beginning of my portfolio.
Okay, awesome. Did you buy those cash or did you finance them with like an investor loan?
Yeah, so I financed them with conventional funding. So that's another, I guess, important point, because a lot of people think if you're living in Japan and you have a Japanese income or living in a foreign country, you can't get conventional loans, but it's not true. You just have to find the right lender. So for both of those properties and for all of the 10 single families that I own, I just had a conventional loan, 20% down. And I've refinanced those properties. So especially those Boise ones, they've more than doubled in price since I've owned them in 5 years. Wow. So I was able to refinance, pull out. That's how I got into the bigger commercial deals I did.
Okay.
So funding is definitely available to American citizens living abroad. You just have to find the right lender.
That's super important. I know that we were introduced when you listened to us on a different podcast, and we understand that many of our potential customers might just want to buy property in the States. This podcast is for buying property in Japan, but it's a real estate podcast. We focus on this area, but most, some of our clients, our friends or colleagues might want to do something else. So that's always an interesting topic, because most people that I've talked to that are active duty, for example, stationed overseas, active duty U.S. military, believe that they can't buy anything in the mainland because they don't have like 50% down, or they can't use their VA loan. Obviously, you can't use your VA loan, and so they just feel like kind of trapped and like get really depressed about it. But no, that's I didn't know that. I thought it was 50% too.
No, so 20% down, just a normal investment conventional loan.
Wow.
I think there are some barriers. Like in my case, it's not, if you're in the military, it's different because you're essentially almost living in America, even if you're in Japan,
right.
Because you're on the base. But of course, all of my documentation is in Japanese. So, some lenders you have to get it professionally translated and all these type of things. It can be so expensive. But what we did is the first transaction, we got it professionally translated, and then we used that template to retranslate all the future documents. And the lenders have been okay with us just updating those translations of things and sending the originals, even though they can't read the originals. Like, they can see the numbers are right.
Like the dates are correct.
Yeah. And then in addition to that, the biggest problem is notary here. So if you're on the base, you can get a notary probably for free, right? Or very
Navy
cheap.
Federal. Yeah, they don't care.
Yeah, but in Japan, as a U.S. citizen, I have to go to the embassy or to the consulate, and you have to make an appointment. And the appointment a lot of times is like a month in advance.
Oh my God.
And they charge you $50 per seal. So a typical house is going to, just a normal house is going to be 7 seals, right? Seven stamps.
Oh my gosh.
So that's, you're paying, $350 at least for those. And if you mess something up, it's really hard to fix it because the consulate doesn't really care. Like they're not like if it's a notary who's getting paid to do it, they're going to double check things. But the consulate's like, do you know what I'm stamping? Okay, I'm going to do it. And they just do it. And give us the money. So you got to be really confident about what you're doing. Which, after 10 houses and a few refinances. But in some cases, it's actually cheaper for me to do a vacation in Hawaii and go out there and just do the notary, because I'll just try to combine it, or like a business trip,
I was about to mention that if you're going anywhere, so I'm thinking like, maybe Guam is close, maybe Hawaii is physically farther, but because there's more traffic, it might be the same price, maybe even cheaper to get all the way out to Hawaii.
Yeah, I think Guam's a good idea. I've never done it before, but I think you could do that.
I know it's 4 hours. I don't know what's going on with the whole COVID thing, but those flights were cheap. I've seen as low as I think $500. I was this is a quick tangent, but I was when I was stationed in Guam, I was on the beach. I was single, so I saw these cute Japanese girls, and I talked to them, and then we go get breakfast, and we have to stop at their hotel. And when they come out of the hotel, I asked, like, hey, like, what's going on with the living situation? Like, how long's your vacation? Like, oh, it was 5 days. And I was like, well, hold on, like, you came all the way out here just for 5 days? And like they were college students. I was like that, it just seemed a little weird because it was like very spur of the moment. They came just for the week. But basically what happened is one of the travel companies out there had this package. You get the hotel, the flight, they give you breakfast every day, and you get free use of like the shuttle, which is more than enough in Guam. It's not a big place. For I think it was $500. I was like, what? And she said it was so cheap we couldn't not do it.
There's a lot of great deals like that to Guam. Unfortunately, right now because of COVID, if I leave the country, so Japanese citizens can leave the country and come back, but even though I'm a permanent resident in Japan, they have basically locked the border. So if I leave the country, I can't come back in.
I remember. I
And
think Japan is the last country to like not have changed that back to normal.
yeah, they just
Um,
recently said they were changing it, but they've made a rule that's makes it almost impossible for you to actually do it. So like you have to get a COVID test 72 hours before and then 72 hours after, or when you arrive, and they both have to be negative.
Negative.
And if obviously, but if you got positive, I could be deported back to the U.S. where I have no health
Ooh,
insurance,
wow.
right? So that would be a terrible situation. So I can't leave the
Can't
country
leave.
until this is done. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that doesn't work out for anybody. Oh man, what a nightmare. Hope this
Yeah.
thing is over soon.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on in Japan right now, right? Especially with the prime minister.
Yeah. Prime Minister changing. There's a typhoon coming this week
Oh yeah.
in a day or two
Jeez.
in Kyushu. So that's kind of close
Oh
to
Oh yeah.
no.
where
There's
Michael will go, right?
Yeah.
there's a crew
Uh,
missing crew too, right? There's a boat that's
Uh,
like missing that went missing.
oh, is there? I know there were some Marines that went missing in an accident. I think it was in Okinawa. Maybe I'm not right. But then
oh,
there's something else. Yeah, there was another boat incident too.
Hmm. Because
I
of the
remember reading
typhoon.
about
Yep.
that.
Yeah.
Um, I've been reading this blog, maritimeexecutive.com. I don't know how I like ended up here, but yeah, I remember seeing something about the Japanese ship going missing. Um, there's a Japanese supercarrier, MOL, off Sri Lanka
Uh-huh.
that's on fire. Obviously, there's the ship that I think it was in Galapagos that ran aground and is dumping a bunch of oil in the
Uh-huh.
Galapagos Islands.
Yeah, I saw that. They have to pay a lot of money, I
Yikes.
think.
Yeah, I mean they destroyed it. It'll eventually get it'll be clean again, but yeah, right now it's pretty rough. Yeah, maritime industry is super interesting. We should talk about that later sometime.
Yeah.
So when you first were introduced to us, Daniel, we were talking to Ziv Nakajima Majen on his podcast
Hmm.
about investing in Japanese properties, where
Yeah.
we did the numbers and we're looking at it. We're like, well, we're pretty sure this won't work. We just want to know why.
Hmm.
And Ziv goes, well, no, I think that'll work. And so we're like, oh, interesting. Like, well, why hasn't anyone done this yet? So, I don't know. We're kind of busy. Like, you should come up here and do that. So we're curious, with your experience, both in investing in the U.S., real estate investing in the U.S., and then your knowledge of the Japanese market. You've been there for a while. What do you think about our idea to rent single-family homes to military service members? And if you need a recap, we can give you a quick recap of how that works.
No, I remember I listened to that podcast. I thought it was a really good idea, really interesting idea. There's a couple of things I'd be worried about. So just to kind of go back, I looked at investing in real estate, of course, in Japan, and I'd love to own some properties here, partly for the diversification, and also it's a good asset protection, because if I ever get sued in the United States, it's really hard for them to take anything I own in Japan. So I've thought about that as my total portfolio, and I do own my own house, and I didn't have any trouble at all as a resident here, married to a Japanese, getting a house loan. But the first issue that I have in Japan is, as you guys know, but maybe your listeners don't, buying a house in Japan in general is like buying a car in the United States. So you buy a house brand new, say $100,000, and it's going to literally depreciate over probably about 20 years, to the point where only the land value is going to be worth anything. In addition to that, the rents are also decreasing, even if you have a completely renovated building, these type of things. Now, that doesn't mean that people don't make money in Japan renting real estate. They do, because the cash flows are usually pretty good compared to other close by countries like Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong. But when you compare it to the United States, at least in my own experience, the returns I get in the United States from, even buying turnkey properties is usually either equivalent or higher, Plus, in the US, you're getting that increased rent every year, increased price every year. And then the final component is access to loans. Because, as I said, I'm a permanent resident in Japan. My wife is Japanese. We have tried to go to a couple of local banks that we bank with and tried to talk to them about loans, and we've been kicked out, which is, it's almost the funniest thing, because you come in and we say, well, yeah, we're looking for a house loan, and they're like, okay, let's get some tea, sit down, and then we're like, it's for an investment property, and they're like, get out. And you're like, what? And they're like, we don't do that. Japanese banks don't give those type of loans. And I know it's not true, because I know people that have it.
People have done it. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have a pre-existing relationship with the lenders that allows them to do it. So this becomes difficult. And I think there's less of that in the bigger cities. So I did look at investing once with a Tokyo real estate agent, and he said, no, I can get you a loan. There's not a problem. But again, a lot of the bigger banks, they'll only loan in those major cities, and the returns are so low compared to what I can get in the US. So I can see how it's attractive to, say, someone from Singapore who's getting like a 2% cap rate. But for me in the US, where I can easily get like a 10% cash on cash return, for example, is probably a pretty easy goal. Not even including your raising prices and rents over time. So for that reason, I haven't done it yet, but that doesn't mean there's not opportunities. And, as I said, I know people who, like my business partner, who owns large commercial buildings, and he was able to get really good financing that allowed him to do that, but I just haven't seen it yet. So I think that's the biggest issues you're going to run into is, first of all, financing. And then just the fact that, as you talked to with Ziv about, where's your exit strategy if the properties are going down in value, especially if you need to cash out investors.
Right.
So, yeah. So, I mean, that's my general idea. I did talk to my business partner, who's a lawyer in the US, and he's also in Japan. And he also had a couple of additional things that I think I sent you. He was worried about the strategy. He said he's never seen anybody able to start an LLC in Japan and then eventually get lending on it, like a foreign company. So that was his first thing. He said he's never seen that. Now, I know Ziv brought that up, and maybe he has a different experience with that. But my lawyer partner said that he hasn't seen that, and he thinks you won't be able to get a loan directly to the LLC. The second issue he had, which may be even a bigger issue, and he said, I'm not a SEC lawyer, so I don't know about this. He said he believes that the way it's structured in Japan, if you are in Japan and raising money outside of Japan, you have to have an SEC license, or the Japanese equivalent. And he said that he didn't think, he thought you'd be running afoul of the Japanese SEC to be doing any work in in Japan, raising money outside of Japan. Maybe that
can we
doesn't
go over
count
that one
though,
again?
if you're yeah.
So he believes that, and again, he's not an SEC attorney, but it's just something he was looking into, that if you are raising money in Japan, raising money for a Japanese property from investors outside of Japan, that would be a Japanese SEC violation.
Yeah, it seemed to be. And as I said, I don't know the particulars.
Okay.
Yeah, but he said that the problem really seemed to be that you were in Japan. So
the problem is that I'm in Japan.
Yeah, he said something like, if you were in the United States raising money for a deal that's going on in Japan, he thinks that's not a problem. But because you're physically in Japan, even making phone calls from here could be a violation. And again, and I wonder if that would even apply if you were doing it from the base, because if you're doing it from, a U.S. property, maybe it's something different. But what his recommendation was, he said, I'm just kind of spitballing here. I have no idea if I'm telling the truth, but he is a real estate attorney. And he said, if I were you, I would contact an SEC attorney, both in the United States and Japan, to make sure that you're not going to run into any problems.
That's super interesting. I had never, thank you. I would have never thought to think about that, and I might end up in jail on accident.
Oh
boy.
Yeah. So, I mean, it would be best, as I said, I'm kind of repeating what I heard, and I don't know if it's 100% true. So it's probably best to talk to him directly and then contact an SEC attorney. But that was his worry in this case. So.
Okay.
That's a new thing for us. We didn't even know about that.
Yeah.
We're definitely gonna look into that.
But just as long as we stay in the U.S. And we have U.S. investors, then we can do it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I looked into in the U.S. side, there's also something to do with this in the way that there's a lot of syndicators that, are part of the, the GP team. And then they'll hire somebody or give somebody part of the action if they raise money. And I was listening to a lawyer on a podcast, and he was saying that's completely illegal in the U.S. You need to be licensed in the SEC, or you have to be part of the GP team to do raising money, and it can't be your only job. So my assumption here is that it's sort of the same thing. Maybe if you structure it correctly, like you guys have talked about having an LLC in the US that has a subsidiary in Japan, maybe if that's the case, then you're not going to have that problem with the SEC. But again, you probably have to talk to a lawyer.
Speak to an SEC attorney. We're almost at that stage where, because I have a few attorney friends. I don't have an SEC attorney friend, and so just like bothering them, like, hey, I've got a question. Those are billable hours, and so we want to get to the point where we're not only not wasting their time, but not wasting our time and our money, trying to figure out what's going on. Because I'm familiar with. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, in general, even if you're not doing a deal like you're doing, one of the hardest parts about being an expat in Japan or in any other country is that you have to work out both sides. Like, I did my estate planning last year, and I got some advice from a U.S. attorney, and he said, "Yeah, this is fine. We'll make this up." And then when I took it to a Japanese CPA, they're like, "You can't do this." Because in that case, I'm responsible, because I'm a resident here. I'm responsible for taxes on both sides. So you really have to have professionals from the U.S. and Japan like working together, or a bigger law firm that can kind of talk to each other. Otherwise, you might get advice from, say, the U.S. side that doesn't work in Japan, or vice versa. So something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, it'll help us consolidate, because I mean, even working with it, if everything we were doing was just in the U.S., even getting to the point of, having a syndication set up that's good to go with the SEC, that's still a process. It's an expensive process, relatively expensive process. And mixing it up with having to do it 2 times, or, the extra legwork to do it in Japan, that's not off-putting, but it's definitely daunting. Reevaluating like how not if we want to do it, but definitely what angle we want to do it in. I think that's really interesting, the fact that you could set it up, the license is in the US, all the investors are American, and we just buy a property. Just, I don't know, like, do we buy it cash? I think that would be easier, but like, where are the returns if you buy it cash? It's the amount of legwork that it would take to make that work just to get the deal to go through. Might have been better to just do it in the US. Like, when you're doing all this extra work, and great, now you've got properties that are, I guess, protected from American attorneys if you're afraid you're going to lose your stuff in litigation. But
But if you have a US based LLC, I don't know if you would have that protection, right?
Exactly. If it's all under a US based LLC, then
Yeah.
I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, I guess that's the issue that as I said, I've run into is that I sometimes see opportunities here, but I think to myself like, yeah, but it's a bit easier for me to get funding and everything in the US. So I'll just go to the US side. But maybe I'm just not being creative or tenacious or something to go through the process. And you know, you have to rely on a lot of other people because Ziv pointed this out as well. Even if your Japanese skills are really good, a lot of the local people that are going to be involved don't want to deal with foreigners. And so you have to get somebody, you know, to do that for you a lot of the time. And they need to know what they're doing, right? So you can't just grab your friend or your wife in a lot of cases, because if they don't have that knowledge to do it, you're going to have some issues. So there's a lot of logistics to deal with here.
Lots of logistics. Oh boy.
Yeah. But I think, you know, the general idea sounds really good. I did pitch it to another friend of mine who is a US professor who invests mostly in the US. And he was very interested. He's like, that sounds like a great idea. I just don't know how you pull it off. That, because all of us who have lived in Japan for a long time know how hard it is to do things here.
In general, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of process that takes place to make even small changes or do something differently. So, you know, it's difficult, but I think it's definitely worth pursuing.
Well, thanks. Yeah, we'll keep it up. It's just now that we're more involved with how Japan works, it's very it's a new kind of culture shock, you know, even more so than when you get off the plane or the boat and you can't read anything. Just especially Fook and I's age, just growing up watching Japanese cartoons and that whole phase of the late 80s, early 90s, where Japan was set to be the number one economy, right? We just assume that Japan is super efficient and things are really easy. Just everyone is this with moving forward, and it's not the case.
Yeah, it's a very analog society still, and this coronavirus has really pushed people to change, right? You know, with telework, all those things. You know, my specialization in education is educational technology, and I never thought, even in my lifetime, we'd see online classes here because, you know, Japan is just so analog. Everything's pen and paper dictionaries a lot of the times.
Wow.
You know, and it's just completely different of what people outside of Japan think, because we think this is a really technological society, and it is in certain ways, but they just are very traditional with paperwork and these type of things, stamps, I think you talked about the Inkan
stamp,
or Hanko stamp, everything. So those are changing a bit, but it doesn't change quickly.
Nothing changes quickly.
Yeah. And as a non-Japanese, it's very hard to, I think, break into the business circles or things like that.
We'll work on it.
Yeah.
I've got a question from Fook here. Article in the Japan Times newspaper about the Tokyo telework trend. Do you experience any trend that people are moving away from the city and prefer to buy newly built houses in secondhand housing markets?
I think there's always been a market for about an hour outside of major cities. You know, for example, I live in Kusatsu, which is in Shiga province, but we're only about 20 minutes from Kyoto Station, so pretty central. And this has been one of the largest growing communities. It's amazing. We didn't realize this when we did it, but our property, which is 15, maybe 20 years old, has actually increased in value, which, as I said, is not something, and by quite a lot, more about 25%. So there's a few little places like that. One thing I was talking to my wife about, I hadn't read the article yet, but I was talking to my wife about it this morning, and she said, one thing you have to consider is that in Japan, it's very hard for people to move. So this is something we don't think about in the US. So what you'll see a lot in Japan is usually, it's a very traditional society. The man is working, husband is working, wife, 2 kids. They buy a house somewhere, and then the company will transfer them somewhere else, maybe to the countryside or something. And what happens is the wife and kids stay in the house, and the husband moves away. And sometimes he'll spend his whole career working in another city from his family and just coming home on the weekends or every couple of weeks. It's a normal, awesome. Yeah. You better, your wife, I hope your wife is not going to watch these videos.
Oh, we talked about it yesterday. She's not happy about it. She's like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the traditional thing. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Part of it is that, again, the house price. So you buy a house in Tokyo or around there, the house price is going down every year. So it's not easy to just sell the house and move somewhere else. And the second part of that is kids schooling. So here, especially once they get to junior high school level, they have to take a test to get into even public school. And that places them where they're going to go to school. And many times the kids have to commute to their school. So you've got kids that are taking a 30-minute bus ride or a train ride to get to their school. And once they're in that system, it's very hard to get into a different school. So for that reason, you don't have a lot of mobility. So maybe over time, you're going to find if the companies are moving out or they're doing teleworking, that families will start buying houses outside of the city. But current families that already have their house built and bought are going to have a really hard time moving just to take advantage of, telework or something like that. So I think those are things you have to think about. And then even in that case, if you are teleworking, do you really, yes, it's going to be cheaper to live in a small town, but, you have to think about schools, and that's going to be your forever home, because that's, when Japanese people buy a house, that's usually their house forever. My wife did say, though, my wife's she's certified as a financial planner in Japan.
Okay.
So she keeps track of a lot of the real estate market and things like that. And one thing she said is there has been a trend of more and more people buying condo units instead of houses, because they do see mobility as a bigger thing in the future. So rather than buy it, because the condos are easier to sell and usually retain value much better.
Interesting.
Yeah, because they're, if I'm like my apartment, it's 5 minutes from the station. There's no other real estate to build, 5 minutes from the station. It's already taken up.
Okay.
So because of that, even as my property gets older, it's still probably going to retain the value and the rents to a certain extent.
That's again, polar opposite mechanic from Hawaii. So a lot of the condos, there's new condos being built all the time, especially now, but the older condos, I think anything built before the year 2000, I have yet to see a condo come down. I've never seen, I believe that as a real estate agent, I think that the life of a condo, of a building, if it's not, regular life is about 50 years. And after that, hopefully you guys took really good care of it, and then you can stretch it out. There's lots of stuff in New York that's been up for a long time. But Hawaii's got stuff that's been there since maybe like the 70s. And the problem with those is it's prime location, either like right on the strip or like right on the beach or down the street from this, world-class mall. Do you know the world's largest outdoor shopping mall was that one in Hawaii?
Ala Moana, yeah.
Ala Moana?
Yeah.
World's largest outdoor shopping mall. So yeah, you've got, there's a complex, I think it was built in 2015, right on top of the parking structure.
Yeah.
Each unit is maybe 1.3.
Infinity pools or something come out. You see
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Some of the units, like your view is the top of Ala Moana. It's got a bunch of air conditioners and stuff. The problem with the older condos is the maintenance fees only go up. And when you're looking at a 3-bedroom that was built in the 80s with $1,000 maintenance fee and a brand new one, the price is a little bit higher, but your maintenance fee is half, maybe less. when you're in that type of market, if you can spend 700, usually you can spend like 8 or 900,000 for a building, and you'll get the one with the lower maintenance fee.
Yeah.
And so we've noticed that condos are actually more difficult to sell, not only because the fixed costs are increasing, but you're paying for amenities like an infinity pool that are closed now because of COVID. It's like, why?
Yeah.
You've got the gym, you've got the pool, you've got like this really nice like outdoor area that you can't use because because of COVID. So people are moving into single family homes in Hawaii. So it's a really interesting concept that condos are more valuable in Shiga, at least.
They're more sought after.
Okay.
I don't know if people are looking for older properties though, because in general in Japan, people don't like older properties. And we also have the maintenance issue. There was a podcast again that Ziv did. They've changed the rule in many cities where if the condo is over a certain age, the city can force the condo boards to, collect. They're going to collect money or increase the fees. So a lot of these older buildings might be going up in price because the condo boards haven't been managing the money very well. And so, I think there's a lot of issues with it, but I think what my wife was saying was that like young couples, instead of, the husband gets a nice new job, instead of going and buying a single family house in the area or within an hour, they tend to look more for a condo. Because maybe even a new condo, but it allows them to at least sell if they have to, if they think they're going to move. Whereas a single family house is much more difficult to deal with here.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is very different than the U.S. When I talk to Japanese people, when I tell them that houses go up in value in America, they just can't understand it. They're just like, I tell this to my students all the time, and they're just like, why? It's older. It doesn't make any sense. And they just can't wrap their heads around it. So it's just a cultural thing here that they accept that property goes down in value, and people will knock them down. If you inherit a house or something, they just knock it down and build a new one. They don't think about it at all.
I've considered that. I went to Osaka once. Osaka. Have you been to Osaka? Grand Front Osaka? Big shopping mall?
I was there yesterday.
Wow, okay. Is the Panasonic store still there?
Yeah.
Panasonic Home?
Yeah, so my place in Shiga is about 40 minutes to Osaka Station.
Wow.
It's really centrally located.
Yeah. I didn't realize that Panasonic had a home division. I know they have appliances, but there's you were there yesterday, so that you can just buy a Panasonic house.
Yeah.
And that's like a huge industry. We could probably do another podcast on it, but like Toyota has a housing division. I wonder, and maybe just like back of the napkin math, you could probably do this. Could that possibly be an exit strategy to just, get the place rented out, have it cash flow for a few years, and then mow it down and then put up a brand new house, new Panasonic house?
It probably could. And there may be a lot of different strategies with that. First of all, just mow it down and put in a new house and then sell that house. If the numbers worked, maybe that would be a good investment. One thing that's very interesting in Japan, I was talking to my wife about this too. When you walk around Japan, you'll often see houses that have a store in the front, and they're selling like some clothes, and they may not even really be open all the time. And you sit there and think, like what are they selling? These guys can't possibly be in business selling these old women clothes or something, And then I asked around a little bit about it, and it turns out that in Japan, there's a very high inheritance tax here. So like between children and parents, you can only leave like a $300,000 to your kids before the inheritance tax kicks in. And in the US, it's like 8 million or 11 million before that starts going, right? So anyway, if you own a house that has a store in it, then you can classify it as a family business. And then you can do it in a lower tax bracket, or maybe even tax-free to your descendants because you're transferring on a family business. So I'm kind of diverging a little bit from this, but
No, it's
I
okay.
think there might be some different strategies. So what you see quite often is a lot of older people will sometimes, if they have some land, they'll build multifamily apartments on it, brand new.
Mhm.
And they're doing it as a tax strategy for inheritance and whatnot. So I'm not 100% sure here, but I think one play, of course, is just, will this make sense financially? Another play might be to think about the tax strategy either for yourself or for the next owner. There may be a way to do that would be, make it more, what's the word? Something that somebody would be more interested in because they can take advantage of the tax strategy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
something
don't know
that
if
Ziv
that
wanted
makes
us
any
to.
sense. But
No, it does. That's something that Ziv wanted us to consider was not that specifically, but like who are you going to sell it to? Are you going to sell it to another service member, or like how are they going to get financing? Are you going to sell it to a local guy? Does the local guy or girl want to deal with foreigners? I mean, the value proposition is that it's rented out to foreigners that are paying this way out of market rent, and it makes sense financially, but is it going to be an investor? Does the new buyer want to live in the property? Lots of ways to think about it.
Yeah. So if the new build has a living component plus maybe a commercial component, I wonder if that would be, that's where I was kind of going with that. I wonder if the new buyer would be more likely to buy it in order to take advantage of that tax wise. I think I told you this, but when we talked before, but a big tax loophole has disappeared or is going to disappear this year. And I think it's going to affect Hawaii real estate big time. And it's definitely affecting richer people in Japan. So I didn't even know this when I got involved, but I started buying properties in the US. And when I went to file my taxes, I found out the deductions I could take were incredible. Like it was ridiculous. Basically, the way that they structure the deductions, the depreciation on properties is if it's over 20 years old, you can depreciate the entire structure cost in 4 years. So if you buy a property that has $100,000 structure cost, that means that directly off my income, I can take $25,000 a year. So for someone like me that earns, $100,000 a year, if I buy 4 of those houses, I can essentially pay no income tax in Japan. And it also lowers my other taxes.
If the home is overseas?
Well, see, this is the thing. It works for all homes, but it doesn't work in Japan because in Japan, most of the value is in the land.
Okay.
So you have like an 80% value in the land and 20% in the house. So you can't deduct that much.
There's nothing to deduct.
Yeah, for
You
a
can't deduct the
20-year-old
land.
home, it's almost zero for the structure, right? So it never worked, but that was the loophole. And so people figured out, Japanese people were like, wait, I could buy US property that retains most of the value in the structure. And if it's wood-based, I can deduct this all from my salary. And that's one of the reasons people were so willing to buy in Hawaii at high prices. They didn't care about the price because they were using it as a tax deduction. And even if it's a brand new property, you can deduct. And if it's concrete, you can deduct for a longer period of time. So I think a lot of the Hawaii market from Japanese investors was driven by this loophole. To be honest, they would have done better buying in places like the Midwest or the South of America because that's what I did. But they were more familiar with Hawaii. So because of that, they were taking advantage of it. But Japan finally realized that there's no point in giving people a deduction for foreign income, for foreign
it's like
properties.
why it doesn't help them out. It incentivizes them to invest outside of Japan.
Yeah, so they're closing it. So this is the last year, and after this year, there's no more deductions. So I think one thing just to think about, and I know I'm probably going on some tangents here, but maybe as a brainstorming thing, tax strategy is going to be really important, I think, in the future to Japanese investors. So they're going to want to find a way to get the tax deductions. They're never going to get the same ones, but how can they reduce their taxes here? Because it's, you know, a relatively high tax country compared to the US in some cases. So they may be thinking about that. So I wonder if you could work that into your strategy for the end buyer.
Okay. How can we help the end? No, that's definitely something to brainstorm on. Like, hey, like here is a vehicle that will help you with your tax situation, while also helping us, you know, exit out of this this property that was so fruitful for the years that we held on to it. Yeah, that helps a lot. Just maybe one option is to build a new structure and then put a store in it, a little shop that sells like old baby clothes or something.
Yeah, and you know, I'm as I said, my wife would probably know better about what those deductions are, but I do know that may be one way to think about that.
Okay, yeah. How's her English?
Oh, my wife's English is perfect. I don't know if she'd want to be on a podcast. She's
okay.
Kind of shy,
maybe
but she'll definitely talk to you guys.
Okay, maybe we'll just talk to her and then do a brief on the podcast. Like, hey, this is what she told us.
Yeah.
Cool.
One other strategy, I hope I'm not taking up too much of your time, but it's something that was running through my head, was, again, these are all brainstorms. Maybe these aren't even going to work, but I just been things
That's what this is. It's a brainstorming podcast.
Yeah. So one thing I thought about is I meet a lot of Americans that are really interested in moving to Japan. You know, like you said, people are into like anime and martial arts like myself, and they want to move to Japan. Also, there's a lot of things going on in the US right now, right? You know, I mean, COVID doesn't seem to be under control. You know, there's protests and all these type of things. So there may be a lot of people, the healthcare is I think one of the big things. You know, if you're not in the military, it's really hard to get access to affordable healthcare, especially for people like in the fire community who want to retire early. And while there are definitely negatives to moving to Japan, I've often said to people like, oh, you should consider moving to Japan. We have great healthcare. You know, if you're not earning a ton of money here, you're living retired, your taxes are probably not going to be that high. And one thing I thought of as maybe a possible exit strategy is to take people in the fire community in the US that, for example, own properties in an LLC, and then have them buy your portfolio in Japan, and then form an LLC in the US, maybe as a subsidiary of their LLC. I'm sorry, they form an LLC in Japan as a subsidiary of their LLC that owns their rental properties in the US. And by doing that, I wonder if they would have some sort of track to residency to get a visa.
Okay.
And it might allow people that are achieve, say, financial independence in the U.S., maybe through real estate, because to be able to come and live in Japan and take advantage of that sort of geo arbitrage, you know, getting lower costs of living. Japan is actually much less expensive than people think. Great healthcare, all these type of things. And I wonder if that's somebody you could target. You know, you build up a portfolio here and you say, you have your portfolio there, you buy into this one, you start a Japanese company. Maybe there's a way to get a visa through that.
Yeah, because I think we do that in the US. I think we still do that. One of the fast tracks to resident, I think it's $1 million. If you put in $1 million, and I think you have to employ like at least 4 people. You wait a little bit and then you can just apply for citizenship. There's a lot of that going on in Japan, where it's like one of my favorite izakayas, for the listeners, izakaya is like a appetizer bar. So one of my favorite izakayas in Hawaii, the owner, or the person that I'm talking to, the person who's running the shop, works at a company, and the company it's like a management company, right? She like applied for a company. It's a management company. The management company is hired by another company that connects Japanese investors with American businesses. And so, yeah, this company basically just says like, hey, like, do you want to become a citizen? Give us $1 million. We've got this whole management structure in place. Not $1 million. Give the US $1 million. We'll take, give us like 20 grand for the admin. We've got this management company set up. We've got people employed to run the shop. So it's a real legitimate business, not like a, I don't know, Instagram factory or something.
Yeah.
And then that's how people get a citizenship.
Yeah, I think it's even lower in Japan. So from what I understand, it's a $50,000 investment.
That's
to
it.
Get you a business. Yeah, if you have 50,000 invested in capital. So that's why I'm thinking it might be a really good way to get somebody to move in, And I think if they have that, they can apply for a business manager visa. And I don't think you need employees or anything. But again, I'm not an attorney. I don't know how that all works. But the thing in Japan is that Japan's economy, and Japanese people realize this, the government realizes it, it's not going to survive unless they start bringing immigrants in. Because, we have a declining population, all sorts of issues. But of course, Japan is very reluctant as a traditional society to bring non-Japanese in. I think they'd be much more happy about bringing in business owners, for example, in this case. And it might be, maybe right now it's difficult, but as time goes on, I think it may be even easier and easier to start businesses here. So okay. I thought that may be something you want to think about as an exit strategy.
Pitch it as the portfolio, sell the business or the portfolio of homes as a business. Let's not in quotes. Yeah, as a business to help people get citizenship.
Yeah. So, or it probably wouldn't be for citizenship, but for a visa.
For a visa.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for a U.S. based investor, if they want to move out to Japan, and the whole geo arbitrage thing, because as I said, the healthcare is excellent. I went to the doctor the other day for a checkup. It cost me $10, right? That included my allergy medicine for 3 months.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that's how cheap, we pay very low cost, of course there are taxes that cover that. But also the cost of living is very inexpensive. You can easily, I live in a three bedroom condo. As I said, 20 minutes outside of Kyoto. I bought it for $170,000. So, very inexpensive. The rent would be about $1,000 a month here, maybe $1,100 if you wanted to live in the rent in here. If it's a bit older, you can get an apartment for $800 a month, or in the same location. Like the building next door is probably 8 or 7.
That's awesome.
So it's an inexpensive place to live. Like I think a lot of people, again, their ideas from the 80s where it was so expensive. It's not like that anymore. Japan is, I find it much cheaper than the US.
Okay. Well, definitely cheaper than Hawaii.
Yeah, I mean Hawaii definitely, but even Idaho, where my mom lives now.
Awesome.
There's no tipping.
Hey, that helps.
Yeah.
I've got a friend, I just talked to her last week. She was in like Nagoya or something, and she got sick. I forgot what it was. She didn't break anything, but she got like really ill, and she like had to go to the hospital, and they did like a scan. And as she was in and out in like, I think it was like a 2 days, like a 2-day stay. And so they like put her aside, like when they were telling her they're about to give her the bill, and just say, hey, just want to let you know this is like, it's a private hospital, it's like a little expensive. And so she's in San Francisco. Like her husband works at like Microsoft, and then she works at some other big tech companies, so they're super successful. And so they're like, like, what is it? Like, we're cool with it, but is it $4,000? Is it like 10? And like, what, how much is it? And they're like, no, it's 400. And she's like, great.
And that's without insurance probably, right?
Yeah, they're just visiting. Yeah.
A lot of times, like my mother came here and she had something and she didn't have travel insurance, and we took her to the doctor here, and he said, oh, you don't have insurance? It's okay, I'll do it for free.
Wow.
And everything was free, because he's like, it's just too much trouble to, I don't want to charge you all this. It would cost $100 or $50 or something. And I was surprised. She even went to the chiropractor here, and they were doing it
Whoa.
for like free or really cheap, because they were like, yeah, you know, you don't have insurance, so it's not covered. And so yeah, it's great. So I think it's, you know, there are negatives. I talked to you about this on a different call, but there are negatives, especially with inheritance tax. If you have a high net worth and you're looking to do that, there's issues with that. There's issues about, as a U.S. expat, it's really hard to invest in brokerage accounts in the U.S. Because the brokerage accounts require usually U.S. residency.
Right.
There's some that will, you know, not do that, and there's ways you can do it as well by keeping your residency in some way in the U.S. But it is something that people run into, and you can't really invest in Japanese brokerage accounts or foreign brokerage accounts, because there's extra taxes that come into that for passive foreign investment companies, they call it, in the U.S. side. And then also, in addition to that, because of the Patriot Act, they have to provide so much information to the U.S. government with an American investor, that it's just it's not worth it to them. So a lot of the times they won't deal with foreign investors, or with U.S. based investors.
Is it as simple as, obviously not, but I mean, why isn't it as simple as like giving it to your wife?
So that's actually the other issue that you have. So in Japan, there isn't this idea a lot of the time of joint ownership, like joint bank accounts, these type of things. So my wife's finances are really separate from mine. And if I have a limit of, I think it's about $10,000 before a gift tax kicks in to give anything
Annually?
Annually, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not really supposed to give my wife over $10,000 a year, otherwise we get charged a gift tax.
Whoa.
There's sort of ways around it. Like most couples in Japan, I don't know if you know this because you're marrying a Japanese woman, but the traditional situation is that the husband's salary goes directly to the wife's bank account, and she takes care of all of the finances for the house and gives the husband a allowance.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And so, you know, this should go over the limit, but in Japan, they have a rule that if it's for household expenses, it's okay. And they don't really look very closely.
Okay.
So you probably could transfer a bit, but it is hard. Like, you know, at one point we were looking at our real estate, which is all owned in my name in America. And for estate planning, we were thinking, oh, could we transfer something to my wife, or could we move it to an LLC that we both own? And when we looked on the Japan side, they're like, no, you can't do that because you'll have to pay gift tax, and any sort of transfer to an LLC is also triggers a transfer tax, and sales tax actually.
Oh, geez. Because I was
so
thinking
there are limits.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking, like, could you, I think we did talk about this, like have the properties in your name, or at least the money in your name, and then maybe put it into an LLC, and then have the wife as like an employee of the LLC, and then have the funds move in that way. But
there are ways to do that.
ways around it.
It's hard to change once you've already structured it a certain way.
Okay.
Because they charge you. But for example, my business partner who owns 2 large multifamily buildings in Tokyo, he owns them in a Japanese LLC, and I believe he does it like that, where his wife is the employee.
Okay.
And so she can get the money out of it. So there are things you can do. But what I found in Japan is, like in the US, we often say to people, just do whatever and change the structure later when you have money. But in Japan, it doesn't really work, because when you change the structure, you have to pay the taxes.
Oh.
And in the case of that accelerated depreciation I talked about earlier, you have to pay all that recapture back if you move it to just an LLC. So a lot of things so for example, my 10 single families are all owned in my name. There's no LLC. And I can't move them to an LLC while living in Japan because of the taxes.
You can't move them into an American LLC without triggering Japanese taxes.
Yeah. So Japan does tax on worldwide income after you've lived here for longer than 5 years. They have a tax treaty, so you'll never double tax, but you'll always pay the extra. So there's a lot of considerations. Like, for example, if I do a 1031 exchange for a personal property in the US, I pay 0 taxes, but Japan will tax me because they don't have a 1031 exchange. So I can't do a 1031 exchange unless I do it in a LLC, and then I use that LLC to fund the next purchase. So as long as things stay within an LLC, I'm okay. So it's very complicated. So I mean, I think, that is, you have to think about this very carefully, especially if you're higher net worth before moving to Japan. But in general, I think it's a much easier way of life than the US, at least from what I can see.
That's wild. That's definitely, I think maybe that'll be the next person we want to talk to is a tax attorney who's familiar with the Japanese laws, because that's, totally antithetical to what I've been doing, where it's like, just throw it together, and then if the LLC is there, go for it. If not, no big deal. You can do it later. And the fact that you have to have everything planned out before you even start in Japan is terrifying. I'd like to know if Fook and I are moving under SOFA agreement. I know that puts a lot of like caveats on like our residency and like, are we in Japan? And so I wonder if that counts as our 5 years.
I don't think it does. I think that you guys are completely separate and you don't have to worry about a lot of this stuff. But yeah, if you move here independently after actually, if you're married to a Japanese, it's automatic. So maybe not while you're in the military, but if you're married to a Japanese, you're automatically a Japanese tax citizen. And you, for example, I mean, one of the worst things I think with Japan is they will tax inheritance in outside of the country. So let's just say, for example, my mother passes away and she has $1 million that she leaves me, even though all of that is in the US, and I have no taxes to pay in the US because it's under that $8 million threshold. Japan, because it's a $300,000 threshold, will tax me on that. And I have to pay the tax in Japan, even if it means having to sell the properties. So this can cause a lot of problems that way. And there's no way to shield it. They don't honor trusts or anything like that.
Oh, geez.
It's all directly transferred to you, and you just have to suck it up or
just eat it. Oh my God.
But so there's issues like that you have to think about. So that's one thing I would say to anybody that's looking to move to Japan or any other country is you have to know what those rules are and probably set your structure up beforehand, especially if you already have assets,
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a lot, just my condo. And I was planning on getting another one while I was here in California, but maybe I should hold off. I don't want we got to figure out where we're moving and what we're doing. She wants to retire in Japan. And the more I learn about it, I'm like, what am I doing? What am I getting myself into?
I think it's a great place to retire. I just you do have to consider all of these factors.
Lots of factors to consider. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. One last question, if you still got time.
Yeah.
What is your superpower?
My superpower. Wait, I had something prepared for this. Now I can't remember what. Oh, okay. Yeah. I think I told you this in another conversation, but the two investors that I work with, we all have a connection to Japan. All three of us are married to Japanese women. We all speak Japanese, but we're all living in separate places. And when we were doing our deals before together, they used to call me the Kanban Musume, which means the poster girl, because both of them are a little bit more, they're really numbers based and they don't talk to a lot of people, but I love talking to people. So I'm always having phone calls and everything. So I set up a lot of our relationships. So I guess my superpower is the Kanban Musume superpower of being a poster girl for whatever I'm interested in at the time.
Kanban Musume. Okay, cool. I like that.
Say that again. Kanban
Musume. Kanban means sign and Musume means daughter. So it's like sign daughter.
Sign daughter. Is it the same Kanban that Toyota does for their TPS production system? Kanban cards?
I don't know, actually. I thought I was trying to. It's not Kaizen, right? Because Kaizen is like gradual improvement, but
that's part of it.
But Kanban is like a poster or a billboard.
Yeah. So what they would do is they'd have the cards, I believe, like over the parts bin, and when the parts bin gets to a certain point, when they read the card, they go, "Oh, okay, it's time for it to get replaced using Kaizen or something like that." But yeah, TPS, Kanban zone.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. Okay. Kanban Musume. Yeah, I don't know if it's fully related, but I just saw that. Yeah, it is a manufacturing system as well.
Okay, that's how I'm familiar with it. So I'm like, oh, is he like manufacturing, the manufacturing girl, or before you explained it?
Yeah. Cool. Poster girl.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Yeah, thank you for the times I was like not looking at the camera, I was taking notes, and so we have a lot of info from you, a lot of stuff to go over. Maybe on a separate call with just Fook and I, just hashing it out and trying to align our strategies. And then definitely we know like who to talk to next. We're gonna try to speak with the securities attorney. Maybe that'll cost us. Maybe they'll bill us for that Zoom call. It can be expensive. You may want to talk to my business partner that I also sent you his information. He's quite busy, but if he can talk to you, I may be misrepresenting some of the things he said as well, because I'm not an attorney. But these are some of the things he brought up. It'd be better to ask. Yeah, we'll give him a call. Definitely give him a call. He'll be out in Japan. He's moving back to Japan next month, I believe. So, he'll be easy to reach. Catch him after that. Maybe he's more settled in, and the move is always crazy. Cool. Well, thanks for your time, Dan. I really appreciate it. We both really appreciate it. Yeah, thanks a lot. This was great. Awesome. Yeah, hopefully talk to you soon. Okay, great. All right. Bye. See you later. Bye.